Happy 2023 everybody. My name is Boy Skylark and welcome to my channel. It has been a good minute since we sat and talked and kind of did any of this really, so I decided that I'm gonna go ahead and jump right into it. As you know, I don't really script my videos, but I wanted to just get into a few different things. If you follow me on TikTok, you saw me go through and show you how to start using Clip Studio Paint. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of go a little bit more in depth with that. Specifically, I'm going to show you guys all the ins and outs of setting up a file and how to use your default brushes. Alright, before I get super in-depth with this, I just want to say that I am going to make a great effort to post once a week again. I stopped posting because I was having a lot of trouble with the video editing software that I was using, and that was no bueno for me. So what I did was I switched it over to a different software, and then that software stopped working, and then I was like, forget it, I'm just not gonna do it anymore. And then now I got the software back. I'm gonna give it another try and hope for the very best. So let's jump in to what's going on. So on your screen right now you can see a file for a comic that I'm working on. If you know, it's called Stars Burn Out. If you want to read it, it's linked down in the description. But right now what I'm doing is I'm working on editing the pages. You can see the little handlebars and everything for all the stuff. But the important thing that I want to show you guys is how I have my entire Clip Studio Paint window set up. A lot of people don't get to see it very often because I don't take screenshots of my entire screen, because my entire screen is massive. It is a 4K screen. Sizing at 2560 by 1440, so it's huge. But essentially what you're seeing is how I keep my Clip Studio Paint set up. Sometimes I'll switch where my tools are and where my layers are. I'll like interchange those depending on how I'm feeling. Right now I felt like I needed a change, so I changed it. I moved my tools over to the left side, and I moved my layers and my auto actions and my layer properties and my materials over to the right side of the screen. As you can see, I have a lot of stuff going on up here at the top where my cursor is. A lot of stuff going on up there. I also keep my tools in a horizontal row right here, just to conserve space. I really don't need to conserve space because, like I said, my screen's really big, but I'm used to conserving space because I'm used to working on smaller screens. Prior to getting my tablet, I worked on a 15-inch monitor, and then I moved from my 15-inch monitor on my laptop to a PC that has a 22-inch monitor, so I was interchanging between those two things while I was in college when I first got Clip Studio. So I tried to figure out a layout that would work best for conserving the space that I have. Now, that being said, there is a benefit to me bringing up my workspace. So if you go up to Window and you go to Workspace, you can register your workspace as a material and submit it to the asset store with the highlighted button right there. You could register it as a material or register your workspace, and you can save it as many different iterations of it as you want. Right now, I'm gonna probably re-register this as a new one because right now what is saved there under Kai's workspace is my old setup. And I know that was a lot to take in, but your setup is important to your workflow. So what you have to do, you don't have to do this. This is not like a, if you don't do it, you're never going to be great thing. It's more for your peace of mind. Figure out a setup that works for you. Figure out a setup that is smooth, transitionally and smooth flow wise. So I'm gonna actually push this up because you guys, as you guys know, I also animate in Clip Studio, and this bar that I just popped up where my cursor is, that is my animation window. That's where your timeline is, where you'll put in your audio, where you'll mess with your animation graph and everything. All that's down there. I've seen people put that up top. I've seen people completely get rid of their layers. No, they'll keep their layers and the color wheel and get rid of everything else because all they really use is one tool, stuff like that. So, that's what I wanted to tell you to start off with. You need to figure out a workflow for yourself that will work properly for what you're doing. I mainly do the big three, obviously. Actually, the big four I do in Clip Studio and interchange in between other programs. So I do some graphic design work in Clip Studio. I do comics, illustrations, and animations, and storyboards, which I would lump into animations. They're not the same exact thing, but I would lump them in together. I do it all in Clip Studio, as well as knowing how to do it all in other programs. So the next thing that I want to tell you guys about, aside from getting a good workflow within your workspace, is how to set up your file. A lot of people start using Clip Studio and they're like, what do I do? What do I do? Oh my god, what do I do? It's not as complex as you think it is. Photoshop actually has a more complex system to set up files than Clip Studio, in my opinion. At least the newer versions of Photoshop, in my opinion, have a more complex system. So if you go here to File, New, I actually have this auto set up in my command bar, and you should too. I think it's set that way by default. It's the little piece of paper right here with the plus sign in the bottom right corner. If you hover over it, it'll say New. But if you click it, this window will pop up where you can see all of your options. So there are 6 options, 2 of which are the same thing, but one just gives you a little bit more flexibility. So you have illustration, animation, webtoon, comic. Easy. You also have printing for a fanzine. So it is a file type where you can put in your illustrations or your anime or your comics for a zine style file, because it has a zine reader. We're not going to worry about that. Right now, we're just going to worry about how to set up a simple, baseline, nothing special canvas. So, I have presets, and Clip Studio comes with a bunch of default presets, as you can see, which that can be overwhelming. Personally, I find that I work best at 300 to 350 DPI because sometimes I work and then I'm like, oh, that's a good piece. I want to turn it into a print. Or a sticker or anything like that. So I personally keep all of my presets between 300 and 350. My usual go-to at the moment is a large piece of paper, which is a 9 by 12 inch piece of paper, or a 4.5 thousand by 4.5 thousand pixel canvas. I also try not to use just straight white. That's just a preference of mine again, but if you find that you work better on white, that's 100% fine. Right here in the upper right hand corner underneath where it says OK and cancel is your unit of measurement. You can change it from centimeter, millimeter, inches, pixels, and points. You can also go here and it gives you some presets for paper sizes, B4, B5, B6, A4, A5, A6, postcard, and custom. It'll always be like, oh, this is custom, blah, blah, blah. But if you go to like US paper, which is typically an A4 size paper, A4 is a little bit longer and a little bit more narrow than a standard piece of US paper. But it's the closest thing that you'll get. A5 is 5x8. A6 is 4x5. And then B-size papers are a lot the same. 10x14, 7x5, stuff like that. I also never mess with the color expression, because if I'm working and I want to do something in color, it needs to be set to color. Gray and monochrome are very useful, but that'll be another video. Also, I'm sorry for saying a lot. It's, like I said, I don't script this. It's just me going off of the knowledge that I already know. So, you can also change your paper color. If you don't want to do any paper color, you could just hit that and it'll load in transparently. If you click the paper color and then you hit the gray box or white box or whatever color it is, you can go, it'll load up your color settings right here, and then you can pick whatever color you want. So I'll just click this green. And then the paper will load in with the green. I'm actually going to use postcard size and just show you. There it is. Okay, so this is just like a basic, nothing special canvas. It has all the most basic parts of the canvas on it. It has a paper layer and a single layer to start you off with. Now, when you first load in, you're going to see that you have a bunch of tools and a bunch of brushes, markers, pens, a whole bunch of stuff. Why is that so weird? Not weird. Not weird. Okay. So, as you can see, mine are all, not all of them. Some of them are default, some of them are custom. I keep 4 of the default ones because these are the 4 that I mainly use for inking. Let me just fix this. Let me just put the color slider back where it was. Sorry. But yeah, I use the G pen, the real G pen, the mapping pen, and the Turnip pen. Those are the 4 pens that I use by default. I also have a couple of Friendin brushes, as well as like custom effects brushes, stuff like that. So I'm gonna switch this. Oops, I'm gonna switch that to black, and I'm gonna put my brush size up to 20. And I'm just going to show you guys what the pens look like with, like, nothing changed on them. I don't think I have anything changed on them. I'm pretty sure I keep them as the default settings and adjust them as I need to, and then put them back to the default settings. So, the main thing that I have with my pens that I change is the stabilizer. So I usually set it to 45 because that's like a comfortable stabilization for me. It's the closest to what you get in Paint Tool SAI in my experience. And then let's make sure it's set to the right sizes. Obviously, you can, if you're using a tablet, a display tablet, or even like a graphics tablet, you can easily work around with some pen pressure. I definitely recommend that if the pen pressure is not working for you, mess around with the actual tablet settings, because sometimes they're set in a way where it's like a little too firm or a little too soft for what you're doing. Excuse me. Where'd my other slipper go? So just kind of mess around with those before you start messing around with the settings of the pens in the program. Here's the mapping pen, which I do believe they say is the pen that like manga artists use most. Because it kind of gives you really slick, quick, like very nice lines. Also, I don't I don't typically turn the stabilization down when I'm zoomed this far out, because I will get like really wiggly lines, as you can see. Because my tablet doesn't like when you don't use a stabilizer for some reason. But yeah. And you can get like a pretty decent variation of line work with that. And then the last one is the, if you guys want to take a screenshot, I would do that now. The last one out of the default brushes is the Turnip pen, which looks like this. It's a lot thicker, but you still get that really nice taper. But you could also use it for coloring. I personally use this one a lot for animation. Because it's thick, but you still get that taper that you want. I also end up using my cartooning brushes a lot for that, because it does the same thing. It's just that they feel more like a Micron pen. Which you guys, if you guys have watched my channel before, you've seen me use Microns. I really do use them frequently when I'm doing traditional work. But now that you saw that, I'm going to tell you how to get your custom brushes back if you decided that you like didn't want certain ones and you were just like, I need them gone. I did that with a lot of the brushes. Excuse me. I did that with a lot of the brushes. Also, obviously, I kept like the default hard and soft brush. So this is the hard brush, and then this is the soft brush. I kept them. They're not at the default settings, but I did keep them. What other default brushes did I keep? Spray, droplet, and I think that's it. Spray and droplet. Wait, there's more. I did keep other ones. Obviously, like erasers. I don't get rid of the erasers. Like the default erasers are always gonna stay there. I never mess with erasers. Trying to think of what other default brushes I kept. A lot of the decorative brushes are defaulted, except for these few down here. All these up here, though, are all default. So, and same with this. These are some default flowers. Actually, that can go in there. These are some default flower brushes. Oops. There we go. Not that one. Haha. I was like, why does that look so different than the defaults that I know about? Ooh. If the particles, if the flower itself is too big, change your particle size, because that's probably what's going on. But this is one of the default brushes. It's the rose brush. Here's the cherry blossom brush. And here's the petal brush. I just used my mouse for like most of that. So those are some defaults that I did keep. I'm going to show you how to add default brushes if you decided to get rid of them and then you're like, ah, dang, I want them back. So if you hit the little 3-bar menu here, or even right click on top of one of the brushes, you'll get this little sub menu. In the submenu, there's an option that says add from default. You can hit that and this window will pop up. And at first the window's a little bit daunting, but if you expand it a little bit more, you can see all of your options. So you have like your default zoom tools, gradient tools, move tools, pen, and so on. So if I were to say add another flower brush, I would go down to the decoration brushes, scroll down to where it says background. Yeah, background or effect. And I would click either one. I already have the 3 flower brushes that they have in the effect section, so we don't have to worry about that. Or clothing, or hatching, or sand patterns, or anything like that. We want to focus on the background. So, I want the fallen leaves brush. What'll happen is typically you'll get a preview of the brush up here in this little window to make sure that that's the brush that you want. Now, the fallen leaves brush looks cool, but not exactly what I want. So I can go to leaves, and it gives me a default leaf brush. But say I want like a whole tree or like multiple trees. You can hit the trees option and then you can add from default the trees brush. Let's go with that. So as you can see, like it's a tree. It's a busy tree, but it's still a tree. And this tree brush by default has a color variation in it. It's a very subtle color variation, but it's a color variation regardless. So if I do 2 like very opposite colors, if you kind of like softly do it, if you add pressure, you can see the color variations very clearly. Right in there. So as you see, it changes colors. So there are some brushes that'll do that for you. I'm gonna clear this layer. So let's do another one. Say I wanted to paint something, but the paint brushes that I have just aren't doing what I want them to do. There's an option right here that says brushes in the add from default section. And Clip Studio Paint by default gives you 3 different brush type options. You have watercolor brushes, thick paint brushes, and India ink brushes. So for instance, say I'm designing a tattoo. Well, the tattoo I want to design is like a traditional tattoo. So I would want the pointillism brush. And it loads. Pointillism is kind of hit or miss in Clip Studio Paint, in my opinion, because it focuses more on like Van Gogh-esque pointillism. Sorry, his name escaped me entirely. Wow. It focuses more on Van Gogh-esque pointillism than like, say, traditional pointillism, you know? Like how there's like dots, like very round pixels. But this brush like is very good for like figuring out like even I can show you guys. It's literally meant to be a Van Gogh-esque brush. And you can blend with it really well. Like, it's a really good brush for blending. So, that's how you add from default. I'm actually going to get rid of these really quick while I have the time to. The only other thing that I showed, actually, let me check my TikTok to like kind of refresh my memory and see what I showed you guys, because I know I showed you how to set up a canvas, and I showed you something else. So I'm gonna try and get it all done in this first video. I'm also not gonna worry about how long the video is. If you stick around, I really appreciate it. I'm only trying to help, I'm only trying to educate, so I really appreciate it. But let me check my TikTok instead of rambling on, so I can get back to the lesson in and of itself. Okay, I checked my TikTok. It seems that the next part was talking about the brushes, and we did that. So I think now what I'm gonna show you guys is the cool small features that will pop up as you kind of organically learn to use the program. So if you know, in other digital art programs, there are options where you can select things called the lasso tool or the marquee tool, or the selection brush. Clip Studio Paint has all three of those things. Let's go look at them really quick. Boom. All right, so if you see on the left side of the screen, there are several different options so that you can kind of select your piece. So let's just really quick draw something. Just draw myself really quick. There we go. So, now that we have me, so let's go back to the selection tools. So there are several selection tools, including some auto select tools. So there are 4 different types of selection tools. There are the marquee selection tools, which are rectangle and ellipse. So rectangle, it's pretty self-explanatory. You can select rectangles. If you select a rectangle out of a few pieces and shift them, and this is just something cool that I've learned how to do by watching others over the years. There we go. You can kind of make a glitch effect. So there's that. And that's using the rectangle marquee tool. The other marquee tool is the ellipse marquee tool. So you can select a part of a piece, and it will take a perfect circle or a perfect ellipse out of the piece, which is very cool. This is also a cool thing. If you transform it, it will transform just that perfect circle, which is cool. Next is the lasso tool. There's 2 different types of lassos. There's a freeform lasso tool, where you can kind of just draw whatever shape you need, and it'll select it. There's also the polygonal or polyline lasso tool, which is a more angular lasso tool. The cool thing about this kind of lasso tool is that if you need to edit any of the points, all you have to do is hold down Control or Command and go to that point and say I didn't like this one right here. You can just grab it and drag it around while holding Control to fix it. And when you let go of Control, it brings you right back to it. And when you want to finish out the selection, you go to the starting point and a little circle will pop up next to your cursor, and you just tap it and it makes the selection. So that's a cool feature. There's also the selection brush, much like the lasso tool. You can kind of make a selection however you want. really cool if you want to, say, color something. So let's make a layer under here, and you want to color something really quick in the same way like a brush does, but you need to make it a gradient. You can do a fill, and then you can use your soft brush to kind of fill it in a gradient however you need. That's just one of the ways that you can kind of use that, but it's just another way of selecting. If you feel that the marquee or the lasso is just a little too inorganic for your selection, selection pen is an option. There's also an erase version where you can erase from the selection the same way you can add. If you don't want to switch tools, you can easily go make a selection and then hold down the Alt key or the Options key on Mac, I do believe. I don't have a Mac keyboard, so I'm not 100% sure. But if you hold down whatever the equivalent of Alt is, you can also deselect. If you want to add to the selection, you can either do it organically by having these options down here selected, having Add Selection as your option selected, or if you have it set to New Selection, what'll happen is it'll just make a new selection. If that's the case, hold down Shift, and Shift will add to that selection, and it doesn't have to be attached. It can be anywhere you want it. Same with the lasso tool, same with the rectangle tool. Those are just hotkeys to help you quickly adjust your selection as needed. The next thing that I want to show you guys that comes organically by default is how to fill a selection. So if you look on my screen, there are several fill buckets. I have the fill tools down here, which are all fill tools. This is a very popular fill tool. Let me give you guys the it's going to open in a different window, but I want to give you guys the asset store number for it. So, obviously you have your regular fill tools, you have enclose and fill, paint unfilled area, lasso fill, and then this one, which I do have the number for you guys. I'm going to put it up here. It is 1759. Oops, my autosave kicked in. 9448. And it is called the Close and Fill tool. Called Close and Fill tool without gaps. It says something in Japanese that I can't read, but it's also made by a Japanese creator. So, and it's by their username is K96. If you need that information. So, I'm going to make sure my recording program is lit up again. So what you have to do in order to use some of these is set a layer to reference. So this is a little lighthouse above your layers called reference. Once that layer is set to reference, all of your tools that require a reference layer will only focus on that layer. So if I go back, and this tool does not come with the program by default. You have to go to the asset store to find it. But I'm going to show you what each one does. If it says refer only to editing layer, it's not going to refer to any other layer. If you fill it in, it's just going to fill in that layer. If you do refer to other layers, I have mine set to reference, but by default, the program sets it to refer to all editing layers. So it sets it to all layers down there. the stack of papers next to the lighthouse in your subtool settings or your tool properties. I have it set to reference because I use reference layers pretty frequently. It doesn't always close the gaps, but it does. You can turn on close gaps and it will close the gaps. I usually keep it off because it fills better sometimes without it on. Enclose and fill is one of those things that I don't really use. It's similar to the close and fill gaps tool, but it doesn't always work. It worked fine there, but there are times where it just doesn't work properly. See? Also, sometimes if you don't have it set to ignore your editing layer, which is right under where it says what are you going to reference, it's going to have a sub option that says exclude. If you click this one that says exclude editing layer, it's going to ignore what's on that layer that you're working on and fill in whatever you select. Ta-ta. As you can see, it doesn't always work. Sometimes the pixels fill in properly, sometimes they don't. Paint unfilled area is the same thing. It refers to a specific layer. And it's similar to the selection brush, where it fills in where you paint and refers to that layer. Sometimes it fills, sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes you just gotta keep trying and hope for the best. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. I don't really use it that much, but I keep it around just in case. Lasso fill is a manual lasso fill, so you have to do all the work yourself. I have it set to a lower opacity because I use it to do some cell shading. But you have to do all the work yourself with this one. And you can just keep going back over things as you need. This is what I use when I'm coloring quick sketches or I'm doing shading on a sketch. And I don't want to be so bothered with setting up a whole new layer and all that stuff. I use the lasso fill tool. It works really good. Last tool is the one that I recommend from the asset shop. It, like I said, it's like enclose and fill, and it's similar to the paint unfilled area, but it works better. It works like vastly better. I'm only going to fill in the hair for this. As you can see, it fills it in, but it fills it in under the lines. So you kind of have to hope for the best when it comes to this sometimes. Okay. Also, sometimes you just gotta turn that closed gap back on, because sometimes that might be... Sometimes, if I say sometimes one more fucking time, ooh, baby. Anyway. You have to turn that on every now and then to get the effect to work. Like I said, I personally keep mine off by default because I don't usually have a lot of gaps in my art, but when I do, I don't care. I don't care if there's a gap. But yeah, so those are your fill tools. The only other thing that I want to show you guys are your transform options. A lot of people don't know that Clip Studio Paint has some pretty extensive transform options. And these are things that you'll end up using by default. I also want to show you guys like one more thing. So, So if I select this one and I hit Command or Control T, or if you have this on, because some people don't have this on, this little bar down here underneath your selection gives you a shit ton of options. So it gives you options to create tones, it gives you options to create fills, it gives you the transform options, copy and paste and create a new layer option, cut and paste and create a new layer option, delete outside of the selection, delete inside the selection, shrink the selected area, expand the selected area, invert the selected area, crop to the selected area, and deselect. And that was from the back to the front, but still. It gives you all these options right here so that you don't have to remember a bunch of hotkeys, you just have to remember the logos. So the transform, see, fill, sorry. You can see the fill here. I'm not going to crop, I'm not going to make new layers, I'm not going to delete or shrink or any of that stuff. But I'm going to show you guys the scale and rotate, which is your transformation options. So what it does is it'll take that selection and it'll create a transformation around it, where you can grab the little handles, which are these little squares here in the corners and in the center points of the piece, and you can scale it down, scale it up, and like kind of change it. You also have the option to undo transformations, rather than, well, you transformed it, now if you don't want to do that anymore, you gotta cancel it and go back. You don't have to do all that. It gives you the option to undo those transformations. So down here in the tool property window, I made it bigger so you guys can see, you have a lot of options, but you need to be aware of two of them very specifically. You need to be aware of the mode option and the interpolation method option. Those two options are the most important when you're transforming as a beginner using Clip Studio Paint. Mode means, what do you want to do to this item to transform it? So if you click it, you'll get a little drop down menu that says scale and rotate, which means you can scale it, make it bigger or smaller, or rotate it. You can separate those two. You can scale it but not rotate it. You can rotate it but not scale it. And those are the first two options. Then you have free transform. Free transform just lets you do whatever you need to do to it. So I'm going to do that on the other one. There we go. So that's scale and rotate. So you can scale it and rotate it. Obvious. Oops. So if we select this next one and we go back and we hit free transform, you can get absolutely wild with free transform. Free transform is one of those options that's like, oh, didn't even know this was a thing. See? Let me just copy one of these heads, because now that I think about it, I'm gonna need another one to show you guys the next part. Okay. So this next one, I'm gonna show you guys the distort one. So distort allows you to kind of skew and adjust your you can distort your piece on a rail, so it'll snap to a specific angle as you see fit. Next you have, holy crap, here we go. Next you have skew, which will allow you to skew a piece. If you grab one of the corners, it's just gonna lift it. You can't distort it the same way you can distort using free transform or the distort option. It kind of just skews it, and that's it. You can adjust it that way. You can adjust it back. And all that fun stuff. The other thing that you guys need to be aware of is the interpolation method. I'm going to show you guys a different transform option in a moment. Just let me explain this interpolation method. This is how your piece is going to look after it's transformed. So right now, if I can zoom in a little bit, right now you can see that the edges are very clear. Obviously this is like post transformed, but you can still see that the edges are clear enough that you understand what you're seeing. You're not losing a bunch of pixel information. It's still as smooth as you could possibly get it. If we zoom out to 100%, it doesn't look any different when it's rotated, right? It doesn't look any different when it's not affected at all. It gets a bit fuzzy when you really like push it and distort it. But if you change it to smooth edge and we skew it a bit, you're gonna get that fuzz again. And it saves as like that kind of fuzzy look. The next one is hard edge, which is nearest neighbor, which tries to keep it as close to what you have on the canvas as possible, but you get these very hard pixels. You get those very, very hard pixels. Next is clear edges by Cubic, which is what I had it set to before. You saw that. High accuracy will keep your colors as close as possible, while also maintaining, while also like kind of blurring the edges. My bad, not maintaining. Kind of blurring the edges a little bit. I think that's all as far as that goes. So those options really help when you're trying to transform something, like say an eye. You want to take that eye and flip it. But you flip it and then your line work comes back all fuzzy and gross. Your interpolation modes, your interpolation options will help significantly. It's literally how the program is told, hey, don't fuck with my line art. I need that to stay clear if you can do that. That's essentially what it does. Okay, next thing that I'm going to show you that a lot of people do not realize is in Clip Studio Paint. I'm going to make a new layer. I'm going to move that. I'm going to take this guy. This guy's face really isn't what I want it to be. So, how do we fix that? Well, obviously, recently Clip Studio Paint put in the liquefy tool, so we could easily just go through and liquefy it. Right? Like we can liquefy it and it'll just fix that way. We can just, liquefy seems to be just a little too willy-nilly. Right? Like there's not enough accuracy for what we want. So let's undo that. And go up to the edit menu. And then go down to the transform menu. And go to this option that says mesh transformation. And look at that. Now, a lot of people seem to think that Clip Studio doesn't have this feature. I've been using Clip Studio since 2015. I do believe. 16? 15? 16? It's been a while. It's not been over 10 years, but it's been a minute. Um, this has had it since I started using this program. So I want you guys to know that this is an option. The wrap transform that Photoshop has is an option here. It's just called Mesh Transform. And you have to go to the transformation options in the edit menu first to get to it. I personally have mine set to Control-Shift-T because you can't go transform and then go right to a mesh transform. It doesn't allow you to do that, which I think is a crime, but you know, we digress, right? Also, here is something that you can do. You can't just grab a random point in the... You can't grab a random point on the wrap. But what you can do interesting. Anyway, what you can do is you can change the amount of points that are on the mesh. So right now it's set to 4. I'm going to set it to 8 across, 4 down. Okay, we're getting close. Really what I want to change is this chin area. This part of the mask is a little too round, and this part of my chin is a little too round. So I want to like sharpen that out a little bit to make it look more like me. But I'm noticing that my vertical lattice points, there's still only 4 and I need more than that. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna also set that to 8. So now I have 8 by 8 squares all over this. And if I zoom in, I can get a little closer to like adjust that mesh, because I don't want to mess with the mouth or the heart or the hair. I just want to fix the cheek and that chin. Inevitably, I'm going to end up messing with a few of those things. Look at that. It shifted it over a little bit. Oh wait, we moved it. Haha. But, and if I wanted to go back in, and I, like, say the hair is messed up, and I need to be really, really specific about how to fix the hair, set it to 10. Set it to a 10 by 10. Is that 10 points? It is. But if that's not specific enough, I'm pretty sure you can set it to 20. No, 10 is the highest. You can only set it to 10. But still, you have the option now. Like, I want to bring like this up and around a little bit. You can get very, like, particular about how this mesh is fixed. And if you hold down your space bar, it takes away the transform so you can see it. Like, it takes away the grid so that you can see it really quick. I use that all the time for putting like graphics on t-shirts, because it works really well for that. Graphics on t-shirts, on posters that are kind of curled, stuff like that. So, what did we talk about throughout this video. We talked about how to set up a canvas. We talked about your default brushes. We talked about how to get your default brushes back. And we talked about selections, transform, mesh transforms. In the last hour, you learned how to set up and use the most basic features of Clip Studio Paint. And I think that's really awesome. I am excited to see what you guys create. I'm excited to see what you guys put out into the world. It is my goal to educate you guys in art as much as I can, with as much information as I can. I do research specifically for you guys. If you have specific questions, if you need specific answers with rock hard information to back it up, please let me know in the comments. Thank you guys for spending the last hour with me. I truly, truly appreciate it. I will see you guys in the next video, where we will probably talk about another topic. Maybe we'll talk about how to start up your comic. Who knows? Thank you again. Much love, and I will see you guys in the next video.